The Jacob Trouba trade saga keeps getting crazier, with a possible new trade location being revealed by multiple insiders, and how reports of a possible trade over draft weekend may end up keeping Jacob Trouba in New York. We're going to break all of that down, but before we do, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 70% of you now watching our videos are not actually subscribed to the channel, so if you want to do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with everything New York Rangers and everything Jacob Trouba at this point, because we have yet another update in this crazy saga of Jacob Trouba potentially being moved at the draft. Then it was free agency, and here we are now in almost mid-July and nothing has happened yet. But we do have another update with a pretty shocking team joining the mix, and I think the return could be pretty interesting for Rangers fans. So let's waste no more time. Let's jump right into the first report, and that is from Michael DeRosa, and we're going to get to his article in just a second. But Michael DeRosa of the Hockey News, has reported the Buffalo Sabres are possibly eyeing Jacob Trouba. So officially now, the Jacob Trouba may be heading to Buffalo over Detroit. It was looking like the Detroit Red Wings were going to acquire Jacob Trouba's services, but now it's looking like it could be the Buffalo Sabres, and honestly, it's getting a little crazy. More details are coming out every day. Buffalo is an interesting location, and I know what you're thinking, right? And we'll dive right into everything right now. And this is from Nick. Multiple teams have expressed interest in New York Rangers captain Jacob Trouba, and there's a few teams actually. And this is from David Pagnotta. Detroit Red Wings, as we know, and Detroit was actually on Jacob Trouba's 15-team trade list. So, or the trade list that he wouldn't mind going to, that he gave to the Rangers whenever he submitted that. The Buffalo Sabres, the Anaheim Ducks, Nashville Predators are all reportedly interested in Jacob Trouba. And I know what Rangers fans are thinking at this point in time. What are we going to get back from the Buffalo Sabres that would make sense for the New York Rangers, right? And I mean, he goes into it here in his article as well. Buffalo Sabres, between Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power, Matthias Samuelsson, and Bowen Byram, the Sabres might have the best young defense group in the NHL. It's true, right? Like, on paper, that's a very good defense. Why would they want an aging Jacob Trouba on a pretty it's a tough contract at this point in his career. It is a tough contract, and Trouba would automatically also be the oldest players, or one of the oldest players in the Sabres lineup in general, and definitely on their blue line. So obviously a veteran presence, that'd be good on the Sabres side of things. But outside of being a veteran presence, Trouba doesn't really fit with Buffalo, and I tend to agree in that way. I think he would fit better in Detroit, but it seems like Buffalo may be eyeing him. Now, I know what you're thinking. We don't necessarily need another defenseman back, right? Necessarily. Like, it would be nice, but we don't necessarily need that. But there is one hole that the New York Rangers have that has not been filled by Chris Drury so far in free agency. And I think you all know where I'm going with this. And let's take a look at the Buffalo Sabres forward lineup. And you tell me what you see, because it caught my eye right away. I don't think he would want to leave the Buffalo Sabres, but I'm thinking Alex Tuch. This player only makes just under $5 million a year for the next 2 seasons. His contract expires when Jacob Trouba's does. So if you're offsetting that salary, you're saving more cap. If you're the Rangers, you can even retain some of the cap, I think, if you're the Rangers, because you still have some salary cap space. Although that is a tricky game, because heading into next year, Lafreniere needs a new contract, Shesterkin needs a new contract, and if they both go off again, it's going to be a problem. So I would be very careful about that. But to look at the lineup again, Alex Tuch caught my eye right away. That would certainly, if you put Alex Tuch on the first line right wing, that could be an issue for other teams. You're adding a player like that to an already, President's Trophy winning team. That is fun. That is a lot of fun. And when you look at their defense, like, it really doesn't make sense on paper to add, unless one of these players is coming back the other way, add Jacob Trouba, but I could see why they would want him, because he would be the oldest player on the blue line. He would add veteran experience, and that can't be understated in the NHL. You need that on a team, especially like the Buffalo Sabres, who haven't made the playoffs in quite some time, over a decade. So going to be interesting. We'll get into that in just a second. But on the other side of things too, personally, moving on from Jacob Trouba, I'm not saying it's a mistake. I just don't think this player is as bad as everyone has blown it up to be, because, there's a lot of recency bias with the Eastern Conference Final. And obviously he didn't play, that great. His decision making was pretty shocking, to be honest. I will say that. but I think it might have had to do with his injury, right? And he wasn't as mobile. And when you're not, you make some shocking decisions. Injuries definitely, discourage you from doing certain things on the ice, split-second things you normally would with confidence. So that might have hindered him. So he might not be, regressing as quickly as Rangers fans think. So keep that in mind as well. I wonder if he comes back next season, because it is looking more and more likely like he will stay a New York Ranger. And I want to get into that as well, because there was some interesting tidbits that came out about, and if you want to pause and read this too, this is a very interesting tidbit about, how he could fit in the Sabres lineup, who could come the other way, how that might work. So it's an interesting tidbit, but I wanted to move a little bit further into this, which really caught my eye, because obviously Elliot Friedman was saying, there's smoke with the Jacob Trouba trade saga, right? All of that surrounding that at the trade, not the trade deadline, the draft. And obviously Emily Kaplan said the same thing. So reports were starting to come out that, yeah, he's heading to Detroit. It's a done deal. It's going to happen this day and the second day of the draft. And it didn't happen. And I think this is interesting as well. This is from Stefan, who is a reporter for the New York Islanders. Boo. It was crazy to learn that Trouba, a Michigan native, added Detroit to his no-trade list when we heard that's where New York Rangers wanted to send him. All legal too, as he did it before he submitted it to the New York Rangers. Reports getting out changed everything for the New York Rangers. What an ugly situation. So there's another monkey wrench thrown into the whole situation, where it looked like he was going to Detroit. It looks like he may accept the trade, right? Or maybe he doesn't want to leave, because we know the whole situation with his family. We do, and I think he has every right to exercise every right in his contract to make it so if he wants to stay, he can stay. I understand that 100%, but I think in terms of the hockey team, Chris Drury has to do everything in his power to make the hockey team better, and that might be moving on from Jacob Trouba, so you have to see what you can do about that. But anyway, to get back to that first point, it seems like once all the noise started coming around the draft, Jacob Trouba was very reluctant to make any type of move or want to move. And it sounds like he doesn't want to leave New York, at least for the next year, which is interesting. The Rangers can move off from next year, but you could do a lot with that cap space this year, right? A lot, because you're not going to have that flexibility heading into next season with Shesterkin and Lafreniere needing new contracts. So I thought that was an interesting report that he added them to the no trade list right before the deadline. Very interesting stuff there, because he's also a Detroit native, and obviously we've been talking about, he wants to play in New York because of his family situation. 100% get that, no problem. But he's a Detroit native, so I could see him, without any of that, maybe even next year, or if it worked out, I could see him accepting a trade to Detroit. So that's very interesting. I thought that was a very interesting part of the saga so far, and it looks like the lack of progress in a Jacob Trouba trade means that he could be staying and returning to the New York Rangers. The longer the Rangers hold off on a trade, the more likely it is that Trouba will remain in New York for this upcoming season. Most notable free agents have already been signed, meaning that if the Rangers were to move on from Trouba, that would leave a major hole in their defense. It's true. I think they could fill the hole, and obviously I think Zach Jones is going to take a huge step this year. But anyway, it's going to be a lot harder to replace at this point in the offseason. Totally agree with that. It also means that most teams will not be willing to take on Trouba's contract because they've already done their work, right? They've already gone ahead and signed their free agents and trying to settle and finalize their salary cap. And if you throw $8 million at a team, they might be reluctant to take that. So very, very interesting. Let me know what you think about Jacob Trouba to the Buffalo Sabres. Maybe Alex Tuch in return. I mean, you're dealing with a bunch of no trade clauses, no movement clauses. It's going to be very difficult to get that done. But, in theory, the prospect of that trade is a little exciting. Would help the first line right wing position. I think Alex Tuch is a very good player, one that you can win in the playoffs with. And I wonder if the Rangers do still look at trading Jacob Trouba. But personally, it's looking like the captain will return next year. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. He's going to be healthy. I wonder what he does next season, because I don't think he's regressing quite as fast as most Rangers fans tend to believe once, the dust settles after a hard-fought playoff series. But anyway, let me know in the comments what you think of Jacob Trouba to possibly the Buffalo Sabres, possibly the Detroit Red Wings, or do you want him to stay? And what do you think about him staying next season? If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.